I wanted to start by asking you to think of the first image that comes into your head when I say each of these two words: unemployed, entrepreneur. Now hold that image and let's compare it to what happened when I typed this in on Google. For unemployed is a guy slouching against a wall. He's looking despondent with papers strewn about everywhere. For entrepreneur, well, it's not even human. It's a godlike figure with 6 arms, with contracts, analytics, and even a bullseye. Did the contrast of these images surprise you? Perhaps it's close to what you conjured up in your mind, and it goes to illustrate the connotations of the language that we use. I say this because every day this year, I saw headlines on youth unemployment and how COVID is impacting recent graduates in particular. If I was a student having to read this every day, it would really depress me. So I started thinking about this word unemployment. Aretha Franklin once said, "You cannot define a person by just one thing." And that's how I feel about this binary terminology of employed and unemployed that we use to label humans all the time. There's a whole host of other opportunities that graduates can create for themselves. So let's think of that word entrepreneur. It's what I would categorize as a suitcase word. Marvin Minsky discusses this in his book, The Emotion Machine, and they're words which have a variety of meanings packed into them, like the word intelligence or the word cool. And contrary to popular narrative, the word entrepreneur isn't just reserved to building billion-dollar unicorns. It's so much more than that. Being an entrepreneur and being entrepreneurial is a state of being. It's a mindset where you turn ideas into action. You're constantly learning, creating, and solving problems. I know most students are already doing a few of these things, so why can't all students be entrepreneurially fluent by the time they graduate? And by entrepreneurially fluent, I mean you have the basics of the key concepts of business, you understand the technology and finance that goes behind building a business, and you have the mindset to identify an opportunity and go after it. This could be a job that you create for yourself. It could be you joining an organization and being an entrepreneur. And I want entrepreneurship to be equally accessible to men and women. 1 in 3 entrepreneurs in the UK are women, and if we have the right support and intervention at university, I believe we can contribute to closing this gap that's worth $250 billion to the UK economy. Now, I've also want to promote entrepreneurship education because I've experienced it myself. When I was an undergraduate, the available set of career options in front of me were law, accounting, consulting, and I categorized marriage as a separate category. Now, I went into consulting by default, and several years into my corporate career, I had all the skills you'd need to start a business. I had an idea, but there were a number of barriers holding me back. Imposter syndrome, the fear of failure and how I would look to other people, and perfectionism. And it wasn't until I did my master's where I had that supportive peer community. I had mentors and role models that I could identify with, and a more robust set of tools that it gave me the confidence to make the leap. In other words, that support infrastructure at university made all the difference. And now more than ever, I think entrepreneurial fluency is critical, not just a nice to have. And there's a couple of market-driven reasons behind this. The future of work is being completely transformed. So if you're an undergraduate today, you have at least a 40-year career ahead of you, which means you're going to retire in 2060. And now that we've all experienced 2020, can you even imagine what the world is going to look like then? We've already seen the impacts of artificial intelligence, of deep tech completely disrupt entire industries and livelihoods. And students I talk to intuitively know this. They know they need a different toolbox to navigate that future. And so the demand for entrepreneurship courses has actually increased over the last 5 years. In fact, 62% of millennials have considered starting their own business, but money is a huge barrier. Universities have come a long way to supporting students fund their ventures, but you may not be able to start a business straight away if you're graduating with 30k in debt. But there is a win-win scenario. Entrepreneurship education has been repeatedly shown to boost employability. So when you're starting out in your career, having entrepreneurial skills and tools can help you be more employable for large and small businesses. And let's say a couple of years into your career, when you've developed expertise, you have more financial security, it leaves you better equipped to start and grow a venture. There's also another factor to consider. There's this persistent skills mismatch between what employers are looking for today and the skills that graduates leave university with. So I wanted to investigate this further. I looked at the job site Indeed.com last week, and they published a list of the top skills that are most in demand in the workforce. So on the soft skills were things like sales leadership, people management, creativity, and on hard skills, things like cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and developing a mobile app. These are all things that you'd be exposed to on the entrepreneurial journey. But let's also consider the case of someone who's unemployed. The average lifespan of a company today in the S&P 500 is 15 years. That's down from 60 years in the 1950s. So if we carry on with this trajectory, half the companies we know today might disappear in 10 years. So can we really rely on the longevity of any one job? When I was at university, a friend said to me, it doesn't matter about your education and credentials. You should always have the skills to make yourself your basic living expenses at least every month. And I looked at him and I said, well, I've got this fancy degree in economics and business. Of course, I should be able to do this. So let me give it a shot. Now, I did do this, but it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I saw an opportunity, I built a business and made around 15,000 in sales before I graduated. But I'd never had to flex that entrepreneurial muscle before. I was used to someone giving me a title and money. And of course, there is nothing wrong with that. But what happens if it falls away? The author Nassim Taleb once said, the three most harmful addictions are heroin, carbohydrates, and a monthly salary. And I didn't know what he meant until I had to make that monthly salary myself. And if COVID's taught us anything, it is the dangers of relying on just one income stream. So, given all this market context, how can universities best nurture entrepreneurial skills? And one way is a university accelerator. This year, we designed and launched the London School of Economics' first accelerator program. And in 6 months, we covered many of the hard and soft skills that I described earlier. The core program was a combination of business boot camps and alongside that clinics with more hands-on learning. In addition to this, founders had the opportunity to lead, whether that was hiring an intern or pitching to investors every week. The crucial point is that it was taught by alumni founders. It wasn't just a load of theory you couldn't use beyond the classroom. You could apply it straight away. And it was often tactical insights that you couldn't just Google. And these were things like, how do you automate your manual operations using cloud technology on a bootstrap budget? How do you make the decision on what e-commerce platform to use to sell your products? And what language can you use in your first few sales calls? And if I take sales skills alone, I looked at a survey of leading founders and CEOs, and 2 out of 3 attribute the majority of their success to solid sales skills. So the Netflix CEO, Reed Hastings, is a great example. He learned by doing door-to-door vacuum cleaner sales. But equally, you can develop these skills at university if you haven't already. Now, the impact of our business accelerator was clear. Our companies hired new people, acquired new customers, 12 minimum viable products were launched. But equally as important was bringing together that community of founders and observing the leadership journey they went through. 2 days before our accelerator was due to go live, the world went into lockdown. We had to pivot the whole model virtually. And we saw all of our founders having to navigate this global pandemic while starting their ventures. But they adapted really quickly. Many of them built digitized versions of their businesses in a matter of weeks. They continued to build and pitch, and I saw the confidence they gained in just 6 months. And so it made me realize that any program we design in the future has to put more emphasis on developing that founder mindset and that confidence to lead, but also creating an environment where we can be really honest about both the rewards, the struggles of this journey, and accepting failure as a part of it. So if I've done my sales job by now, I've hopefully convinced you of the benefits of entrepreneurial skills. So what can you as students do to nurture entrepreneurship and make this more accessible? Well, I stalked the Bath Entrepreneurship website ahead of this talk, and you're already building an amazing ecosystem, engaging alumni founders, doing podcasts, even building an accelerator. And I want to give you an insight into the long-lasting benefits that this could have. When I was a student, myself and a couple of friends were looking at the prospect of having to build our businesses out of Starbucks when we graduated. And we wanted to make sure we could keep our community together. So we pitched to the founder of a car parking company who we knew was expanding into office space. And we convinced him that he needed Columbia entrepreneurs as part of his space. So we negotiated a deal of $100 per desk per month, far cheaper than anything else you'd find in New York at the time. And the university saw this space, saw this initiative and the demand for students, and funded our first ever incubator. And that first version helped us to keep our community together and get our businesses off the ground. And the success of it led to the expansion across the whole university. And it was complemented by a suite of programs and events for entrepreneurship. So my message is to keep building that ecosystem, because the network benefits of this will go far beyond your time at university. And I still lean on that community today for business and leadership advice. The last thing I want to say is engage your female founders. While men are much more likely to start business, men and women have thought about this at similar rates. So if we can bring to the surface some of those barriers for women at university and address them, we can contribute to closing that gap, which I described earlier as worth 250 billion. So if you are a female founder watching this today and you have an idea and something holding you back, come and talk to me after this session. And on a final point, I wanted to share something that I read from the social entrepreneur, Muhammad Yunus. He said that all human beings are born entrepreneurs. Some get a chance to unleash that capacity and some never got that chance. University is one of the best times to give yourself that chance. So go out and build something or help a friend build something. The paths that can open up to you as a result are limitless. You can be an entrepreneur, you can be entrepreneurial, be self-employed, be employed with a side hustle, but definitely not a statistic under youth unemployment. Thanks for your time and for listening today.